Okay, good afternoon everyone. I'm Dr. Malcolm Davis. I'm Senior Analyst in Defence Strategy and Capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. We have a great opportunity this afternoon to discuss the future Air Force, harnessing excellence, technology and partnerships to deliver the next National Defence Strategy, which, as I'm sure you all know, comes out next year along with the new IIP as part of the biennial defence policy process. So we have a great set of speakers today to discuss this, and I'd ask the panel to come up onto the stage, seating from right to left. So Nick, if you can come up on stage. John, next. Corporal Khan. And then First Assistant Secretary Hawkins, please. Now, we have mics coming. We're short a few mics, so we are going to have to share mics, particularly during the Q&A, but hopefully that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So I would like to now invite Andrew Forbes, the Chief Growth Officer of QinetiQ, to come up and give the keynote for the panel. Andrew, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Distinguished guests, Air Vice-Marshal Hogan, Air Vice-Marshal Haly, Ms Hawkins, esteemed colleagues from across defence, industry and academia. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss a shared imperative, ensuring that Australia's air power remains at the cutting edge of capability, innovation and strategic deterrence. The National Defence Strategy sets forth a clear vision for a sovereign, self-reliant and integrated joint force that can respond with speed, precision and resilience to the threats of tomorrow. But realising this vision is no small task. It requires foresight, investment and most critically a whole-of-nation effort that brings together government, industry and academia. First and foremost, we must ensure our air power aligns with the National Defence Strategy, which prioritises sovereign capability and deterrence through denial. The ability to independently sustain and enhance our defence capabilities is not just an ambition, it's an operational necessity. Modern warfare is evolving at pace. It's no longer enough to dominate a single domain. The battle space is now truly multi-domain, spanning air, land, cyber, sea and space. Our adversaries are leveraging new and emerging technologies and we must be prepared to respond to and counter these threats with agility and adaptability consistent with our strategy of deterrence by denial. The need for a robust, integrated and resilient force has never been greater. Seamless coordination across domains is not just a force multiplier, it's a strategic imperative. The air domain plays a pivotal role in this, acting as both an enabler and an active combat space, requiring continuous innovation and investment. It's in this context that we must think about Australia's role, not just as a regional power, but as a nation that contributes to global security, a credible and contributing partner to the security alliances where we are a member. Our partnerships with key allies, our investments in sovereign defence capability, and our approach to technological development will determine our ability to maintain a credible and effective deterrent and maintain our position in a global security context. The strategic environment is becoming more contested and unpredictable. The Indo-Pacific is now the epicentre of a great power competition where rapid technological advancements in hypersonics, counter-space capabilities, electronic warfare, and integrated air defence systems are reshaping deterrence and coercion strategies. In this evolving landscape, the Australian Air Force must not only respond to today's threats, but anticipate those of the next decade. The National Defence Strategy provides the broader defence context, but within that, there is a pressing need for an updated Air Force strategy, one that succeeds Project Jericho, which drove the creation of a fifth-generation Air Force. Since Jericho, the capability landscape has shifted dramatically. A new air strategy would lead to investments that directly support Defence's strategic goals of deterrence by denial and sovereign self-reliance. Australia must look beyond today's force and focus on transitioning towards future capabilities. These capabilities include embracing greater autonomy, human-machine teaming, AI-enabled mission systems, advanced electronic warfare, and resilient networks that will underpin the next evolution of air dominance. The shift to future capability isn't just about platforms. It's about a system of systems approach that blends crewed and uncrewed assets, integrates seamlessly across domains, and ensures that Australia can both lead and operate within coalition air power constructs. As we move forward, air superiority will be defined by our ability to integrate effects across multiple domains at speed, with survivability and interoperability at its core. The role of technology in countering emerging and future threats is fundamental to delivering a decisive advantage, especially in enabling an Air Force to secure and maintain control of the air, one of its core and enduring roles. As highlighted by the UK's Chief of Air Staff, the key lesson from Ukraine is clear. Without air control, forces are drawn into an attritional ground fight, which we must seek to avoid in any future conflict with the peer adversary. The proliferation of advanced adversary platforms, including China's J-20 and emerging J-31, J-35 stealth fighters, as well as Russia's Su-57, coupled with longer-range air-to-air missiles like the PL-15 Thunderbolt, demand serious planning for future capabilities. The Global Combat Air Program is one such response, designed to complement, not replace, fifth-generation assets like the F-35. However, to counter emerging threats effectively, it will take more than GCAP or the F-35 alone. The future fight demands autonomous collaborative platforms to augment crewed platforms, creating a mix capable of delivering combat mass, survivability, and lethality. This combination is seen as cost-effective and an operationally decisive means of achieving air dominance against a peer adversary. QinetiQ globally is at the forefront of enabling some of these developments. In the UK, we are partnering with the RAAF's Air and Space Warfare Centre to establish a DroneWorks Centre of Excellence, bringing defence, industry and academia together to accelerate UAS and counter-UAS capability development. We're also collaborating with the RAAF Rapid Capabilities Office to trial the Nexus Combat Cloud node on our airborne technology demonstrator aircraft, helping to shape the backbone of future multinational integrated networks. As NATO and the UK Defence prioritise rebuilding integrated air and missile defence capabilities, QinetiQ is leading the formidable SHIELD exercise and working on an integration support backbone for multi-domain command and control, sensors and effectors. We also continue to support the UK Ministry of Defence with technology exploitation projects such as Dragonfire, which is advancing directed energy weapon capabilities with experimentation at our UK ranges. In Australia, under the Joint Adversarial Training and Testing Service, or JATS contract, QinetiQ provides the Australian Defence Force with critical test and evaluation and threat representation services. We're currently developing simultaneous launch capabilities to emulate the swarming effect of uncrewed targets, ensuring defence personnel are prepared for emerging adversarial tactics. Additionally, we're working with strategic partners to deliver Joint Terminal Attack Controller, or JTAC, on-wing training capabilities, further strengthening our ability to provide realistic, advanced air-land integration training. Through QinetiQ Air Affairs, we're projecting Australia's training and simulation capabilities into the region. Our support to the Singaporean Air Force, including last year's 14th exercise in South Africa, demonstrates our ability to deliver integrated crewed and uncrewed training solutions internationally. We also provide credible and relevant uncrewed target deployments to Japan, South Korea and New Zealand, enhancing regional readiness and interoperability and demonstrating our credibility and capability as an allied partner contributing to global security. Across all of these areas, QinetiQ is enabling the rapid development, integration and assurance of cutting-edge capabilities that will be essential to securing operational advantage in future air combat environments. While technology is a critical enabler, true capability is realised through partnerships. Defence cannot and should not do this alone. The collaboration between defence, industry and academia is essential to driving innovation and capability development. At QinetiQ, we recognise that the most effective defence solutions come from deep collaboration. A prime example of this is Team TEXA, our dedicated test and evaluation, certification and systems assurance enterprise. By bringing together leading industry partners and academic institutions, Team TEXA is building a sovereign capability that ensures Australia has the infrastructure and expertise required for rigorous test and evaluation of next generation air power systems. This model of collaboration is not unique to Australia. We see it in the United States, where partnerships between defence contractors, the Pentagon and leading universities are accelerating the development of AI-enabled air systems and next-generation autonomous aircraft. Likewise, in the UK, the Royal Air Force is working alongside industry and academia to advance synthetic training and crewed-uncrewed teaming, which is shaping the future force through cutting-edge research and live experimentation. By leveraging international best practice and collaborating with local industry and academia, we're enhancing Australia's sovereign test and evaluation capability, developing homegrown expertise and strengthening national resilience in air power. In closing, it's clear that delivering air power advantage in today's contested environment will depend on a deliberate blend of future-focused capability development, integrated force design, and faster, more agile delivery models. To meet these demands, there's an opportunity to better leverage experimentation, test and evaluation, and technology exploitation, ensuring that emerging capabilities, whether autonomous collaborative platforms, next-generation countermeasures, or advanced directed energy and electronic warfare systems, are fully integrated into the force structure. Bringing together the domains of autonomy, hypersonics, uncrewed systems, and resilient multi-domain networks will be essential to generating the operational mass and survivability required in a rapidly evolving threat landscape. Ultimately, the collective challenge ahead is to link these capabilities to broader defence objectives, supporting the long-term transformation required under the National Defence Strategy, while maintaining the agility to deliver integrated effects today. By fostering deeper collaboration between defence, industry and partners, we can move with the speed and purpose necessary to outpace evolving threats and ensure our power remains decisive across the spectrum of operations. At QinetiQ, we stand ready to play our part as a trusted capability integrator and assurer, working closely with our military customers and industry colleagues to help achieve this vision and ultimately deliver decisive advantage to the warfighter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. They were really thought-provoking and sort of interesting thoughts on how QinetiQ is contributing to the future transformation of air combat capability. So much appreciated for that excellent keynote. That takes us now to the panel discussion. We have 4 excellent speakers. On my right, Air Vice-Marshal Nick Hogan, Kurios, who is the head of Air Force capability for the Royal Australian Air Force. Air Vice-Marshal John Haly, who is the head of military strategic plans. Corporal Sitra Khan, who is, I believe you're the RAAF Aviator of the Year, is that correct? No. All right. Okay, well, I'm sure you're going to make a great contribution, nevertheless. And finally, First Assistant Secretary of the National Defence Strategy, Ms. Amy Hawkins. Firstly, let's give our moderators I'll start off with a general question to the entire panel. It's Avalon 2035. Looking back over the last 10 years, what do you think are the challenges that we've faced in developing the transformation of air power and air combat operations? In other words, a look ahead. We've only got 2 mics, so we are sharing them, unfortunately. Who wants to go first?
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, Andrew, very much for the opportunity to participate in the event today, and thanks, colleagues, for passing the baton to me. Look, before I outline what I think are probably the top 4 challenges, if you look back on the decade, as you said it, Malcolm, I think it's worth just reflecting on Defence Strategic Review 2024 National Defence Strategy and then where we are right now. I was on that journey through the DSR and the NDS. You're all quite familiar with the story. Most complex, most challenging strategic environment that we've faced since the end of World War II, a rapid transformation and reform of the defence organisation, a complete rebuild of the IIP to move us from a balanced force that was really quite capable of responding to a lot of low-level contingencies, to now asking the defence organisation and the ADF to do something very different, which is to develop a much more lethal and capable ADF, an integrated focused force, as we say, that's sort of capable to responding to high-end contingencies. So that was what 2024 NDS said. 12 months. It's only 12 months since the 2024 NDS has been published, and I think most of us in this room would probably agree that that picture, that strategic environment has gotten even more complex in 12 months. And I don't say that lightly. You know, the 2024 NDS looked at US-China strategic competition. It outlined it as being the defining feature of Australia's national security environment and something that we needed to grapple with. Well, that competition, it's ramping up even more over the last 12 months. 2024 NDS also alluded to what we predicted would be a growing collaboration between China, Russia, Iran and North Korea. That's borne out. We've seen that over the last 12 months. We've seen particularly the growing collaboration in Ukraine, and then of course tech advancements. So what we thought might eventuate is eventuating, but it's probably continuing to happen more rapidly. So then to go back to your question, if you're at 2035 and you look back and go, what should we have done? I think for me there's probably 4 things, but my RAAF colleagues will have much more expert advice from a capability perspective. The most important thing, I think, is our ability to translate new technologies and keep ahead of the technology curve, and our ability to actually translate that rapidly into ADF capability. That's not just a defence problem to solve, as we know. That's something that we need to work in partnership, defence, industry, academia, the science and tech sector. That's what we meant when we talked about a concept of national defence in the National Defence Strategy, whole of government, whole of nation approach to tackle really tough challenges. So who can best, get capabilities into, in our case, the ADF, but what militaries are going to be able to do that the quickest and the most effectively is going to be a decisive factor. And then the things I'd flow on from that would be, as we're bringing those new technologies and capabilities online, we spoke about in the 2024 NDS the importance of maintaining a really highly skilled workforce that's actually capable of integrating these capabilities, of operating them, maintaining them and sustaining them. That's going to continue to challenge us because these things are moving rapidly and quickly. So how we maintain focus on that is important. Third thing I'd offer, as we increasingly have a more integrated Air Force, as we increasingly have a more integrated or networked ADF, our ability to protect those assets and capabilities from cyber intrusions is going to continue to pose significant challenges for us. And then lastly, the strategy of denial really highlighted, in addition to the significant investment we're putting into the ADF and the rebuild of the IIP, was the fact that we now more than ever, we need to work more closely with partners and allies in order to collectively deter threats to all of our interests. So from an Air Force and a space perspective, looking back 10 years, our ability to, as we're integrating these new capabilities, our ability to make sure that we're remaining interoperable and interconnected with our partners, obviously our US alliance, but also particularly regional partners. Japan is a critically important one. So lots of challenges. There's 4.
Yep, absolutely. Corporal Khan?
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Amy touched on the highly skilled workforce. So that's me. No, jokes. What I'd like to say is the perspective that I come from, it will affect our purpose integrating these new systems. Obviously, we're seeing the shift towards autonomous systems and AI being incorporated into our maintenance systems as well. So what does that mean for the boots on the ground? How will training be incorporated? How will it be rolled out? And how will that tie into what our core purpose is? Will that change for us? Will our skills be applicable to the systems that are coming in? And with the pace that we're going at, will we be able to keep up with them? So, yeah, go on with Air Vice-Marshal Hogan.
Do you want to hear from John first?
Go John first, and then yourself. You're lucky last. So.
Yeah, so we'll leave the impact player for last. Add my thanks as well, and thanks to QinetiQ and ASPI for facilitating this. So I think that was really well said. We, as an Australian Flying Corps, we used to have people that were there to dope the canvas and stretch them over the wings, right? And those people don't exist today. They're working on low observable technology on F-35s. We will see technology influence it. But those people do exist today. It's the same young Australians that join our all-volunteer force and put on this colour uniform or any of the other colours from our other services to go and do what they're asked to do. And so I think that one of the hallmarks of 2035 will be that we'll look back and see that those same young Australians that come through our recruiting centres, that partner with us in industry, that work with us across government and in other elements of the Australian public service, will still be doing really great things for us to meet these challenges that we're describing. So it's not certainly not all doom and gloom. There's lots of opportunities there. The Air Force that I think I joined and the kind of strategic Canberra kind of bubble that I think I entered a little bit later in my career feels very different to the one that we're in today. While we spend so much of our time in Canberra working with our teammates from other parts of government, and I think that will continue, and that's a success story for us. And it's one of the benefits of being a relatively small by population nation is that certain professionals and practitioners actually can work well together without us acting like independent business owners scurrying around doing what we think is right but not talking to each other. The same thing happens out at the waterline for the Navy and all across the country and across the world. Our Air Force people today are stationed everywhere from Syria and Lebanon, working in United Nations operations, to other non-UN operations in places including North Africa. We have people in Europe. We have people training and working with the United States all across the Pacific and across their country as well. And so those people are, I think, rising to all these challenges. So I'm trying to bring the good news story part of this. But at the end of the day, we in the military love our symbols, and we love history, and we love heritage. And so I think one of our key challenge will be retaining what's great about those things, retaining what our traditions teach us and how instructive they are for us while we do all this adapting, while we are drawn to the wonderful technology and the benefits that it offers. The final thing to actually more directly answer your question is I hope that we're showing up to an Avalon 2035 and we're celebrating the really great things we have done in our enabling technologies and in our enabling elements of our Defence Force and nationally across the north of Australia. If we're getting our infrastructure right to include physical and digital infrastructure, our logistics and all those other types of things, those are the underpinning efforts that will mean that technologies we might build and train with on East Coast bases are actually able to be brought to bear and used and be credible as we put the strategy of denial and deterrence by denial into effect.
Thank you. Nick?
I think you're right to turn away because I think everything else has been said, but there's a couple of things that I would say. It's the Air Force's birthday on the 31st of March being Monday. That's when we'll find out who the Aviator of the Year is. Right. I'm not a chance for that, let's be fair. And thanks to ASPI for considering having a junior aviator on the panel. This is very, very unusual. And Sitra is the person who is on the front line. And when we look at the defence of the nation, that's the person who will be out the front. And this is the person that we need to support in everything that we do in day to day. And if I go back 10 years, everyone else has gone forward and looking back. If I go back 10 years, that probably wasn't necessarily the realisation of where we sit today. As an organisation, you've seen in the news, the Royal Commission, the way that we are looking after our people, the way that we are situating and putting the processes in place to look after our people going forward will situate us very well as we look after our people as we go forward. The Chief of Air Force talks about 3 priorities. The first one is people, the second one is purpose, and the third one is preparedness. Each of those complement each other, but central to everything. Doesn't matter what happens with technology going forward, people, Sitra, will be on the front line for us for decades to come. And we always need to keep that in mind as we go forward. Going back 10 years to answer the question specific to air power, if I go back because they've gone forward, is that we're now integrated. We talk about integrated, not joint. Joint was 3 services that looked after 3 domains, if you like. Integrated is much more than just 5 domains. It's also integration across government, because each parts of government bring different parts when we talk about national power. And so it's a much more evolved way of thinking if you look back over the past. I'll leave it at that. No.
Thanks, Nick. That was excellent. So I do hope we are here in 10 years' time. I'll be pretty old, but I think it will be a great discussion to have in 10 years' time to go back to that question and say, were we right? A technological question now, which I'll start with you, Nick. There's a growing importance of autonomous systems and collaborative combat aircraft, and there are clearly also an increasing vital role of space domain. These two areas are driving changes in how air operations are undertaken. So how is the Royal Australian Air Force going to be ready for future air and space operations given these technological developments that are occurring? Nick, you want to
Thanks,
start?
Malcolm. I'll pull away from the Royal Australian Air Force and I'll just talk about air power. Air power is an effect that we provide as part of the integrated force, and you'll hear that more and more as we talk about the way we apply military effects as a policy arm of government. And so in terms of the way space plays, cyber, well, everybody knows. Every day we're under cyber attack. I mean, if you don't think you're under cyber attack at any one time, I've got a wonderful third cousin in Africa somewhere that's willing to talk with you through an investment scheme. What's the wrong term? Strategy, yes, a wonderful plan. Anyway, so cyber aside, space specifically, back to your question, the more we provide our capabilities at longer distances, space is key to providing that effect. And remember, the whole point of the military effect is proportional, legal violence as part of denying a potential adversary an opportunity to provide their will upon us. So when we look at space, space is integral to the way that we provide that power as we go forward.
Excellent. Would like other commentators?
Thank you. So with this question, the CCA, the Combat Collaborative Aircraft, I don't have much to do with aircraft in my role. I'm a communications electronic technician. So I think with this, I pose, when we talk about capability, it's often aircraft, it's often capability, it's often air crew. Ground crew kind of get overlooked in the operational readiness side of things. I myself, I've been in for 7 years now, but I haven't been deployed. I haven't been in the situation where I'm in a contested environment. So to the Air Vice-Marshals, like, how do you expect myself and my colleagues to be ready in a situation like that?
You asked us a question and you're on the panel?
That's very innovative. I like it.
I gave you the chance to look at my notes.
Okay, all right, well, this was not expected, obviously. We've not rehearsed this. All right, so Sitra, nice question too. She's better at this than you, Malcolm, let's be fair.
Yeah.
So in terms of how we would prepare our people for the way we would integrate across the force, it's really the training that we develop now and the way that we look at ourselves going forward. We talk about combat collaborative aircraft, uncrewed aerial systems. They are just an adjunct to what will always, well certainly for the foreseeable future, be crewed platforms. Nobody inside government, from my perspective, is talking about letting something loose that is autonomous and let it do its thing. We don't talk like that. We talk about humans in the loop, we talk about humans on the loop, but certainly being part of the decision making going forward. So it doesn't much matter whether you are air crew or whether you are ground crew, but at some point you are controlling the capability that goes forward. I'm trying to escape that question, Sitra, and I'm going to talk to you about that later, so we'll leave it at that.
At the end of the day, I think our Air Force training group, the training efforts that occur all across the Air Force that are specific to platforms or specific to roles and specific to challenges, they are adapting as our understanding of what's needed adapts. I had the privilege last Wednesday to be at RAAF Wagga for a recruit graduation. So these 46 young Australians had walked into the base 9 weeks prior and had completely changed their lives in that period of 9 weeks as a first but incremental step towards being prepared, towards being able to make a contribution and be employed and, if necessary, deployed to go and do their specific roles. They'll now be in technical training institutes, or they'll be learning about logistics, or they'll be at a school that might teach them to become a RAAF chef. But in each part of that training, they are slowly being prepared. My answer to you is actually often the best preparation is not by going and doing it. We are not in a position where we train our people in a similar method to cutting yourself so you can practice clotting. We would prepare to actually, in that context, ensure we have healthy bodies so the body can cope with clotting if and when the time comes. The times that I've been deployed, largely to the Middle East, largely in those sort of specific war of choice kind of combat scenarios, have actually been times where we have not practiced the full gamut of what we train for. And as a squadron commanding officer, to prepare for going across to a conflict zone like that, we actually were investing in our people in the roles and the skills that we knew they wouldn't be using for the next 6 to 7 months, so that when we came back, they were still prepared and ready to go and do the next thing rather than this thing, because we trust our training, and at the heart of that, we trust our humans.
Amy, would you like to? Okay. Well, a question then for you, Sitra, which I understand yours focuses on communications and electronic warfare. So let's talk about the future of electronic warfare and how that plays a key role in air power. We've got the Growler, we've got the Peregrine coming into service, but these are going to be operating alongside autonomous systems and also via space capabilities to function. So how do you think the future of electronic warfare looks for the Royal Australian Air Force?
Yeah, that's a really great question. As I said, I'm not really involved with these sort of platforms, so I think I can provide the kind of human perspective to these answers, to these questions. Mm-hmm. How does that look? It probably looks similar to how it does now in terms of the people we have, in terms of the support that we get from our defence industry, the training that we get provided, and I think what I'm trying to get at is if we are supported with a more holistic sense, if industry is involved right from the get-go, we might not see those issues that come down to us operationally that we normally do, those teething issues. We've got to think of all like the roles that are involved as a whole, just instead of the pointy end of things, I think.
Mm-hmm. If I could add to that, everything is becoming more and more connected to be sequenced to provide lethal effect precisely, at precisely the right time, at precisely the right location, with precisely the right amount of effect, so that it's proportional and without unintended consequences. Those capabilities that you talk about are complementary in order to provide the best effect that you can. Sitra and her colleagues will be asked to do more in terms of understanding why we're doing this now, to why this mission effect at this time, in order to sequence their priorities and their work rate to get after the things that matter. If I use the example of combat collaborative aircraft, that system itself, it doesn't just fly without somebody operating it in the background. There's still maintainers. It's an airworthy platform, so there's still maintainers required. There's still payload specialists that are required. Those payload specialists, if they understand what's on this particular piece of capability, then what's on the other pieces of capability, they can make sure that things complement as they go. And true innovation comes from the kids that are on the line. They see the opportunities, because they're like, hang on, this thing over here does this. I could tweak that on this platform and I could fix that for you. Citra's playing down the role that she has. But trust me, someone as smart as Sitra could see all of this and pull it together at a tactical level and allow us at the top to be able to pull it together strategically and then argue our case when we go forward.
How does that work in terms of incorporating that sort of perspective into the National Defence Strategy, so that the National Defence Strategy and the IIP are more relevant to the sorts of things that Sitra is talking about, and also to what Kurios is talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. It's a really great question. I think Nick and Sitra have kind of outlined it very well, and hopefully it gives you a sense of the fact that we are actively having these conversations in defence and in the ADF. Just finishing off on what Nick was saying, how we create the environment, the behaviours and the cultures where our junior personnel are encouraged, enabled to bring forward innovative ideas and solutions is really, really important, and we're getting better at that. From a national defence strategy and from an IIP, as we look forward to 2026, I'd really go back to when you look at the strategy of denial, we've very deliberately outlined 6 capability effects within that strategy of denial. We don't talk about individual domains, we talk about 6 capability effects that require effort across all domains, but AI, autonomous systems, uncrewed systems, critically important across many domains. But those effects are, for example, the ability to project force, or the ability to hold adversary forces at risk, the ability to sustain protracted combat operations. I could go on about the 6 effects, but what we are doing, Malcolm, and what we need to do more of is continue to make sure, as we're conceptualising the strategy, as we're reviewing those 6 capability effects, making sure we've got the services in the room, making sure we've got defence science and technology in the room, so we are actually testing both our understanding of where these technologies have gotten to and whether or not we're best leveraging them to design a strategy that creates the most asymmetric advantage for us. And that's what we're actively doing. A 2-year cycle gives us a real opportunity to continue to tweak and evolve this as we go.
I have to ask though, I mean, given the pace of international change and I would argue degradation in the security environment, is the 2-year cycle actually able to keep pace with that?
It's a good question, because I know certainly towards the end of last year we were talking a lot about, is 2 years too quick? Is 2026 going to be evolution, not revolution? I still think 2026 will be an evolution of the strategy we've got. The core foundations of it and what we're seeking to achieve, I think, stand true. But what it does highlight is the necessity to have this conversation with government on a regular basis, because it's all about strategy, capability and resource alignment, but also defence and government being able to also communicate to industry where our thinking is at, also being able to communicate to the public. So I don't want it any sooner than 2 years, Malcolm, but I think 2 years is about right. Yeah,
I think we have to be responsive to strategic shocks and unexpected change, which is what we're all experiencing now. Let's stick with the NDS. I think Air Vice-Marshal Haly, let's talk about how the military strategy of deterrence through denial, how it emphasises long-range power projection to hold an adversary at risk at greater range. A key part of that is investment in new air-delivered standoff capabilities for the Royal Australian Air Force. It's a very positive step going forward. But how do you think the Royal Australian Air Force in undertaking that mission will influence the NDS going forward for next year? You know, what sort of capabilities beyond what is likely to be in the IIP or what it has been in the IIP in 2024, how will the Air Force actually make that effect or generate that influence to say we need something more because the environment has changed or the strategic outlook has changed?
Yeah, okay, that's That's a good question. It's an interesting one, and I'll actually hand it to Kouros in a second because that's exactly his job. But from my perspective, I work in the joint, the Australian Defence Force part of our organisation, and Air Force is a key voice among a lot of key voices in distilling what is a clear strategy from 2024, and then deciding in that context and aligned with that strategy, what must we do? What specifically are we going to task our various elements of the Australian Defence Force to do and be prepared for? And with that strategic guidance then comes the clarity that both operational commanders, such as the Chief of Joint Operations, but also our other operational commanders, for want of a better word, the Air Commander being the relevant environmental commander in Air Force, now knows what the women and men in that team need to prepare for in order to contribute to the wider effort. So it's through that and through our preparedness focus that Kouros mentioned before that it becomes clear when we're tasked to do something what it is that we need, where the gaps or opportunities are to improve the Air Force's ability to do it. I'll make the point that realistically, in 10 years, to go back to a previous thing, made up statistic, but something like 80 or 90% of what we have to fight and fly with in 10 years is on a ramp today. We're watching it here at Avalon today. So, the entirety of the Air Force does not change. It's not all about large capital acquisitions. It's actually about purchasing those elements at the appropriate time to join the stable of capabilities that through which we actually provide the air power effect.
Mm. And just to give the specifics about how Air Force would inject this into the requirements, as it's more centralised, and so it should be. The easiest way to say this, if I could break it down simply, the National Defence Strategy, let's just say Amy writes it all by herself. John Haly helps to pull the strategic way in which the military would fight in scenarios. We then work with force design to say this is how air power can contribute, and then that then is looked at across the entirety of the priorities with the resources available to create what is the Integrated Investment Program. So the Integrated Investment Program is actually the resourcing of the National Defence Strategy. The way Air Force contributes to that is in a collegiate way, looking at the scenario and saying, hey, the capabilities that we have here are able to do these things with the other domains and sequence with the other domains. And then where we may have risks and how we might treat those risks are the opportunities that we might chase those through different means. And we would work together through detailed, classified experimentation to come up with ways to address those potential risks that we might face.
Amy, did you want to add anything to that?
Nick and John have covered it really well. It is a good point as well, Kouros, about in addition to looking at the capability effects and the strategic effects that we are asking the ADF and the Defence Organisation to deliver, we test them against a series of credible scenarios, and that's a critically important part of this process. And so that's something we'll do again as we go through 2026. Coming back to what you were saying before, Malcolm, about shocks in the system, that's how we also integrate that thinking into the way we do the strategy development, that then we'll come up with the strategic effects, the scenarios based on a threat-informed picture, and then hand it to the capability managers, to the VCDF group, who will then run that against the IIP to come up with the best combined effect of both capabilities we have in service plus new technologies that we know are coming online.
Okay, good. Let's talk a bit about industry now in terms of how you work with industry. It's clear that there are challenges that could slow the ability of the Royal Australian Air Force to work with industry, so to deliver future capabilities. So how might these challenges, what are they firstly, and secondly, how might these challenges be better addressed for the Royal Australian Air Force to work with industry?
Yeah, Malcolm, I might lead off and then I'll ask Sitra to flow on from that one. So we cannot deliver anything that we do now without industry. So it's a fascinating dynamic in which we find ourselves. The more we bring industry into our understanding or into our thinking, we get a better result longer term. So we have traditionally been at a point where we're concerned about a litigious action based on bringing an industry partner into the tent. And when I say into the tent, to get them to understand our thinking, look through the threat situation or through the eyes that we see, and then we make, and previously we've not done that. In recent times, we have done this at a few times, and what we end up getting is a more achievable timeline in which we can implement capability. That is so important to us right now in a world of constrained resources that Australia finds itself in, because if I say to you tomorrow I'm going to deliver a spacecraft that's going to launch off a rail in the middle of the desert with no resource population, and I can do that from tomorrow, so give me $1 billion, that starves another area of the organisation of $1 billion. So being realistic and being open with your industry partners is critical to move forward. But I'd like to throw to Sitra to talk from a more tactical level how she works with industry at the tactical level.
Thanks, sir. So I was previously posted to RAAF Tyndall. I worked at the Air Traffic Control Tower, and I can offer a lived experience with this. So during training, we were told we'd work on state-of-the-art equipment. We'd be working with cutting-edge technology. I got to Tyndall and I was working on a radar from the 1970s. So I'm talking CRT monitors, Windows XP.
That's sort of cutting-edge.
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is, you know, we were trained for one thing and then we got there and it was another thing. The other issue was this radar was obviously going to be phased out. So training on the system was also cut away. And now we were put in this kind of weird limbo where we're not trained on the current equipment, but we're getting trained up on the new equipment, which hasn't been installed yet. So what are we doing? Our people got sent away to get trained up on the course. My posting also got extended to cover the gap with the lack of training that we had on the current system. So when the new radar did finally come in, we also had to send people away to get refresher training, because by the time it got in, everyone forgot how to do anything on it. So taking people away from the unit also, you know, puts pressure on the people left at the unit. So I think if we want to kind of address that speed to capability, we also have to engage with the operators earlier on in the piece and ensure that, you know, training, support and rolling out kind of align with delivery timelines.
And I was just going to say that the point you're making speaks also to personnel retention, in the sense that, you know, we've got a serious workforce problem with the ADF in general, not just the Royal Australian Air Force. And if people at your level are not being given the training they need to do the jobs, they're more likely to go and leave to go to the private sector.
That's it. It not only affects the operator, it has a ripple effects on, you know, morale. It has ripple on effects throughout the workforce.
Nick, you were going to make a point.
Oh, I was just going to say, and they're classic examples of where we see stability from industry, who's able to continue to deliver while we pull people in and out for training, so that we can continue to operate professionally, you know, educate ourselves and then move through on systems. So the more integrated training that we do, and I say integrated, it's very unusual these days to not have industry playing as a core part of our training system. So raise, train, sustain is quite integrated now with industry as we move forward. That was the only thing I was going to augment on Citra's excellent example.
Clearly we need to do better in these areas. Finally, AUKUS Pillar 2. Opportunities to develop new advanced capabilities on new technology areas, artificial intelligence, autonomy, hypersonic and counter-hypersonic technologies, electronic warfare. There may be other priority areas added to that list down the track. Question to you, Amy, where do you think the NDS, the next NDS and IIP, will be able to better integrate AUKUS Pillar 2 into Air Force's future capability?
Thanks, Malcolm. I think, and I'm not just saying this, I think to be honest, we've actually done a pretty good job at embedding the priorities of AUKUS Pillar 2 in terms of what we're trying to get after within defence, within the IIP. It's about all of the reforms that we need, from my perspective anyway. You'll have a capability lens on this. You know, we're not just getting after the priorities that are highlighted in AUKUS Pillar 2 because they're AUKUS Pillar 2. It's because our strategic environment tells us that we need to get better at AI, we need to get better at autonomous systems, we need to try and crack hypersonics, counter hypersonics. So to me, it comes back to some of the other things we've been talking about today, is how do we actually get the system to, we talk a lot about, you know, speed to capability and acquisition. We talk a lot about either minimum viable capability, working more closely with industry, enabling our people to think creatively and embed that into our thinking. So for me, not to repeat some of what we've talked about earlier, but I think that's what's going to be critically important for us. We need to continue to focus on it, prioritise it, and continue to invest in it.
Any other thoughts?
So I think one of the opportunities for AUKUS is, or one of the things we should recognise up front, as important as AUKUS is, as important as nuclear power submarines under Pillar 1 and the innovation and work Amy is referring to is, in a lot of ways we shouldn't forget that we already have existing highly successful bilateral activities, multilateral activities through a range of different mechanisms. AUKUS Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 are clear opportunities to do really wonderful things to improve our national standing and our ability to defend ourselves in national defence. No question. I'm looking forward to, you know, when AUKUS becomes a verb with our humans, when we are acting and behaving and thinking in a way that that is more like what we describe when we list a set of emerging, highly pivotal, consequential technologies. So when we are working closely across the range of, you know, the traditional, the known AUKUS partners and others that might join for certain endeavours, that also builds a human endeavour between our respective nations. I think that's very important as well.
Okay, well look, we have about half an hour for audience Q&A. So we have a couple of roving mics, I believe, in the audience. We do? Right.
Is this the roving mic?
That's the roving mic. We've only got
You
two
can
here,
have
so
this
we've got two over there. All right, we have two roving mics in the audience. So the floor is open for Q&A. Who would like to go first? Feel free to jump in. Yes, gentleman down here. And please identify yourself when you ask a question.
Steve Young, long history in T&E in Defence and the Air Force, and in strategic planning as well. My question is, there was a recent announcement of acceleration of $1 billion of spending in the budget by the government in the run-up to the election. Is anyone willing to comment on whether that will remain completely aligned with the existing NDIS and IIP priorities, or if there's a shift in where the emphasis is going to be? Thank you very much.
Who wants to take that?
Thanks, Steve. Happy to chance my hand at this. So, I mean, first of all, you know, Defence really welcomes the acceleration of the additional $1 billion into the forwards. $59 billion into Defence for 25-26, 239 over the forwards, and when we look at the decade that this National Defence Strategy and IIP has been funded for, it sees a doubling of the defence budget over that 10 years. It's a lot of additional investment, a lot of resource, which certainly we really appreciate. In announcing the $1 billion, the Deputy Prime Minister's already highlighted a couple of areas that funding will be used for, and they do align with the government's agenda as articulated in the NDS and the IRP. So the few that he's mentioned include continued investment in HMAS Stirling and in Henderson. It's critically important for the optimal pathway for AUKUS Pillar 1. That was the number one priority for investment for the government out of the NDS and the IRP. The government's also talked about some of that money will also go into GWEO and accelerating some of our GWEO plans. So yes, I think it's aligned, and I think the system will continue then to look at that funding profile as we then move into NDS 26 and IRP 26. So it's really, I think, the government bringing forward an additional amount of money to help us get after the priorities that they set for defence.
Okay. Ewan, down the front here.
Thanks. Yeah, Ewan Graham from ASPI. It's a product of a curious and disciplined mind, so maybe it's a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But from a capability and innovation point of view, who are the international models that are most relevant to Australia, size and technology level? And a spin on that, if we look at China, let's say China is the benchmark. We won't call it an adversary, but it's a benchmark of capability that we have to take into account. The mentality for looking at that mostly is it's the problem set. But they've also been pretty successful at some of the capabilities that they've been able to roll out and innovate. If we look at that, maybe not as a model, but as a comparison point, is that system so non-transparent and different that it's just something else? Or can we actually learn from what they're doing in a positive sense as well?
So when we take our national defence strategy and we distill that into specific plans to meet what the government's tasked us to do, the first step of a military plan is to understand who is on the other side of the plan, to understand what that pacing challenge is, what capabilities they have, etc. I would argue, and if it comes to conflict, if we're fighting in the Middle East with ISIS and it's 2016, the first step at the operational and tactical level is to understand the enemy and to therefore be threat informed, to make decisions to both be as lethal as possible but also as survivable as you need to be while you do that. So in that sense, we are already 100% focused on the various pacing challenges of our day. Some of the PLA capabilities are those, some Russian capabilities are those, and then some other asymmetric or bigger threats, terrorism and other vectors are also pacing challenges for various parts of our organisation. So we learn from that perspective, there's no question. I also think that we should and I hope will learn from nations such as China as they develop technology in the same way that, frankly, it appears that they are learning pretty well from us as well. But there is no question that over the last decade or decades, the technological gap between the capabilities that the Western ideological hemisphere and the capability that others have has been narrowing, and so it is important to be threat informed, and it's also important to find ways, as our strategy tells us we must, to create gap so that we can be lethal and survivable and deter.
Okay. Yes, lady down here. Down here. Oh, we've got down the front there. Sorry, I think I saw her hand first. Then you're next. Okay.
Hi there, Jess Thomas from QinetiQ. I note your responses around the importance of industry and how we need to work together as a partnership. You touched on the fact that the whole ecosystem needs to improve, but how can industry improve? How can we better partner with you to accelerate that capability to the front line?
If you could make everything free.
He knows he did that and then hands it straight to me. So I think, first of all, what helps us immensely is being able to tell you the entire story. And being able to tell you the entire story means you must go through the DISP program, as in your security accreditation, so that we understand that you can protect the information we're going to give you and share with you. Being a trusted partner, you've got to jump through the same hoops as us and enjoy that little ride there. It's a lot of fun. But that being said, once we do that, we can give you the context in which we operate, and then through the combined might, and I say might, there's a lot of might in the industry that just says, why are you chasing that? Just one fraction to the right, and you can get this in the space of a certain amount of time. And an honest conversation, not a business development. That's not what we're after. What we're after is a common ground to a common understanding. Now, there's always going to be challenges when you're on the bleeding edge of technology. That's accepted. But let's give it our best shot, and so that we've got a coordinated voice as we go forward, so that government understands what they're signing up to when we bring them options. That's how I would say. And is that an improvement? No, it's just better communication, and then us talking together to go forward from there. I've seen so many success stories. MQ-28 is a very good success story. That was not on a good road some years ago. It was very adversarial, and it's open. Boeing will admit that. We will admit that as well. But now it's at a point where we talk at the right levels about what is happening right now in the developmental and prototype capability that it is, and where we are looking to take that capability. And it's an honest conversation so people can understand and plan. You have to make money, we have to deliver capability.
So it doesn't have to be free. The other thing I would add, and I think it's a real opportunity, and thank you to those companies that already kind of go after this, to be involved in employing people and allowing them to be members of the ADF Reserve. Reserve, people that aren't in full-time service but are some other category of service within any of the three services, it can be seen, I know, as a challenge, particularly with things like freeing people up to go on reserve leave to participate in exercises. And there's also a planning challenge from a workforce perspective to be thinking about, well, if all my reservists are taken away from me just when I need to be doing a bunch of work in industry, then that's also going to be a challenge, and it can be a risk from a business continuity perspective. And I get all of that. What I would say though is that firstly, we are invested in better understanding where our reservists are working and what they're working on. We are it's very clear, the COVID pandemic, for example, made it very clear to us that somewhere in the 30 to 35% of Army reservists that work for No. 2 Division, headquartered out of Sydney, but these people are around the country, they're also our police officers, our nurses, our doctors, our school teachers, and in large part, so many of our service-minded, community-minded people are community-minded by joining the reserves, and they're already community-minded in their full-time employment. What it means is we then need to understand where those people are working and exactly what they might be able to be used if deployed for. Sorry, let me start that again. What we might use someone for when we're deploying them, or more importantly, when we might choose to deliberately not ask to deploy that person because they're already doing a critical role in the national interest within industry. So we are working to be better at that, and I hope that that in time creates an environment where it is less risky to take on those roles within industry. The flip side of having defence reservists working within industry is that you get the benefit of a defence-minded reservist from the perspective of understanding each other, us to you and you to us as well. So I see the ADF reserves as a really fertile opportunity for us to get to know each other better, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all risk on the organisation's part. We have a similar issue with members of, for example, our Australian intelligence agencies who are civilians that work in those areas but might be defence reservists. We're smart enough not to go and grab people out of crucial positions to go and become to work as an artillery officer instead of working in an intelligence agency, as an example. We would do the same for you, and we're seeking to be better at that in the future.
Okay. Gentleman at the back there. You went there.
Lucas Cohn from Aviator. A question regarding the NDS for 2026. When we see the potentially incoming government or non-continuity of government and the let's say the statement's been made to purchase, as an election promise, to purchase 30 more JSF, that doesn't align with the NDS currently, how does that impact the NDS for 2026?
Thanks for the question. We're at an interesting part of the cycle, obviously about to go into an election. Bottom line is, depending on who gets elected post the election, Defence will then work with that government to implement their agenda. So in terms of, you're referencing the opposition's announcement that it would follow through with the purchase of the 4th Squadron of the F-35. That's obviously an opposition pledge. The Defence Strategic Review and the National Defence Strategy delayed that 4th Squadron, didn't cancel it, just delayed it in order to put investment into other priorities in the IRP as part of the NDS 26 and IRP 26. Defence will have that conversation with government about, based on, as we've been talking about today, threat-informed assessment of the strategic environment, and then re-look at where we recommend and where we think the best investments and priorities would be.
I think I'd add to that. I mean, we're looking, I think, at a quite important inflection point in air power capability, where not only do we have CCAs starting to mature, but we've now got GCAP, we've now got F-47, we've got FAXX, which will be the contractor will be announced this week. We've got FCAS. So there's a bunch of next generation capabilities starting to mature, and at the same time, the FA-18Fs and the Growlers will be steadily getting older. I know the IIP 24 said, I will keep the Super Hornets and the Growlers through to 2040. Do you think there's a possibility that they might revise that in the light of these new capabilities starting to appear, with suggestion being, for example, that F-47 is actually been flying for quite some time?
I think the advice that that Air Force in that example give will continue to be answering the exam question that the government gives us in the first place. And so while the priority choice was made to delay the acquisition of the further 28 F-35s, to go back to that example, that priority choice to change that if the government, the people send us, tell us to do something different, it doesn't mean that it invalidates the whole headmark strategy that sits above it. It's a different interpretation of how to get after that strategy, and therefore a change in priorities if that was to occur. The same thing happens, I think, with these emerging technologies, with opportunities that might exist in the future to partner in or acquire technologies developed overseas. That will come into the mix, where the air power professionals will provide advice, and then the department provides advice, and the ministers and the cabinet act and decide knowledgeable based on advice, and they make the choice. So, when the Australian population send their representatives to Canberra to form a government, then their Defence Force and their Defence Department will act.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Who else have we got questions for? Gentleman over here.
Hi, I'm Brad Yelland. I'm the Global Chief of Engineering and Technology for Babcock. Excuse me, my voice is a bit funny. I've been in the industry for a long time, 40 years in fact. Engineering and technology, I used to be with BAE Systems. I've been to every air show since it started. I've been to ASPI conferences, and all I can say is that the common message that comes across is the need to be faster, quicker at getting capability into the hands of the warfighters. And yet we don't seem to be able to do it. So, you know, very frustrating for us in industry. No, we can't make it free because we have to eat, just like you wouldn't do your job for free. So, but what we would do if there was more certainty about getting technologies into the hands of defence is we would invest more. So my question is, and it's a little bit of frustration, but I really want to know the answer to the question, what is it that we should be doing to quicken that up? So to give you a really now example, the vehicle autonomy that sits within MQ-28, we were using to fly UAVs around the sky in 2003. And yet it's taken 20 years to actually get it into the hands of the operator. So maturity hasn't changed, maturity is the same. So what is it that we need to do? How is it that we better communicate? I've gone through the DISC process. I've had full access to the planning scenarios, the strategic planning scenarios. So we understand the problems that you're trying to face. The biggest problem is how do we bridge that gap? How do we bridge that gap between proven technologies and actually getting it into your hands?
So I guess we've all heard enough. Oh yeah, fair enough. Sorry, John Haly said you'd have all heard enough from me. All right, so it is a follow-on question from what we were talking about before, and I realise you've now out of vision from me. That's all right, Malcolm, don't move. But what I would say is we are tightening up the innovation system in general inside the defence organisation. So for folks that aren't aware, we have stood up the Advanced Strategic Capabilities Accelerator, ASCA. ASCA was hosted by Defence Science and Technology Group for its first 12 or so months. That has now, as of Monday coming, it will be moved under the Vice Chief of Defence Force. That's a pretty strong move, and it's not disrespect to DST, it changes in importance in what it does. I will get back to your point in a sec. There is still the prototyping innovation specialists that sit inside each of the services. Jericho Disruptive Innovation, my apologies, in one of the stands in the halls down the road, turns 10 years this year. They were the genesis of a lot of great innovation from our junior aviators to get stuff into the hands of the warfighter faster. But what was happening was there was quite regularly good ideas at the lower level that weren't connected with those at the upper level who were making the decisions and the recommendations for government, who essentially controlled the resources. As a result of that, there was a lot of promises made to industry at the lower levels that was not connected to resourcing. So things ended up in a valley of death. Our Vice Chief of Defence Force is gripping this up completely in order to provide certainty and direction to get scarce resources to move forward. So what does that mean for industry? It means you should be getting more certainty more often from us, because we're allowed to talk to you, for starters. That culture is eroding that previous culture of we're not going to show you, we're not going to talk to you. And when we do talk to you, we should be able to talk to you about, hey, this is what we're expecting to do. Things change. And what I would say in regards to things change, our strategic environment gets a pretty big vote on what our minimum viable capability is going to be. But we can tell you why, and we can show you that information. It's not going to satiate your question straight away, but I can see changes already coming forward as we move forward. John Haly wants to talk now.
I think your question's a good one, and your frustration is valid. But I also think that if we look back at the conditions, back in those shows, and what life was like and how we were able to interact with industry back then, we have come a long way. I genuinely believe that. I actually think this is very similar to anything. You know, you start playing golf, you just want to hit one good shot. You hit one good shot and it brings you back another time. But as you improve and as things go on, you get mad when you hit one bad shot, perhaps. You know, nothing has changed in terms of your appetite to learn to play golf. You're just changing what you now consider to be good enough and fast enough. And so the heartening part, while some of the challenges might be disheartening, the heartening part is that there is appetite both in industry and in government for this to continue to improve. And our golf game has probably improved, but we still have appetite to make it better, and that's a good thing. So thanks for having the appetite.
John Haly's golf game is not improving. I've seen it.
Did you have any questions? Okay, any more questions? We've got a bit more time. Yes, at the back here.
Thank you. I'm Flying Officer Ravi Gampala from Air Warfare Engineering Squadron. My question is to do with sovereign capability versus our reliance on our allies in the future come 2035, following on from Malcolm's thinking. So there's a spectrum of being fully self-reliant with sovereign capability, however you define sovereign capability being are these companies that design and manufacture things and ship in parts from all over the world, or are they fully vertically integrated Australian companies? That's a question. So my two questions are, what do you think sovereign capability actually looks like in 2035? And what is the balance of sovereign capability and our reliance on our allies into the future? Thanks.
Thanks very much for the question. I think this is going to come up more and more. It certainly is coming up more and more as we're turning our mind to NDS 26 and IRP 26. I would describe it as, for me, I think we need to think about sovereign capabilities in terms of maximising the ADF's access to capabilities as opposed to purely being developed in Australia or grown. It's about maximising our access to capabilities because that enhances our security. So it's sovereignty, but then you've got to look at ownership and control. And so as long as you have the ability to assure access to capabilities and as long as you have the ability to control capabilities, that's, for me, a force multiplier in terms of sovereign capability. But this is a conversation that we're actively having at the moment. So, but I don't know if my colleagues have got something else you wanted to add to that.
Thanks. I don't have anything to add to that, but I do want to make the point, like, this is why, for us old people in the room, like, this is part of our younger generation of our all-volunteer force, right here, so we're in good hands.
We do what we want, when we want, with what we've got. That's how I would explain sovereign. We don't have to own all the parts, but what we have and when we own it, we can use it. And so we are too small to own all of the parts of the machine, but be able to do with what we can. That's probably as simple as I can put it.
I realise I'm standing between you and a very nice afternoon tea at the back there, so I think we will wrap things up here. I would like to thank our panellists, Air Vice-Marshal Nick Hogan, Air Vice-Marshal John Haly, Corporal Sitra Khan, who you did really great, well done, and First Assistant Secretary Ms Amy Hawkins. Thank you. Give us a round of applause.